Hello and welcome to another managerial special from the Honest Football Podcast. And for the second time this week, we are back to talk about a returning manager to an EFL football club. We're of course talking about Burton Albion, and Craig and Charlie are with me as always to digest all of the information. So lads, we will talk about Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink and a return to Burton Albion in a moment. But of course, as we always do, we'll start with the outgoing manager and talk about him. And this one, it's probably a bit of a sad one. It's quite clear Burton have got a heavy heart on it with Jake Buxton because he played for them over two stints. He was one of Nigel Clough's disciples there and at Derby in between. And of course, a captain the club and became player manager in the summer. But this season, 2 wins and 21, it was never going to end well, Craig, was it, results-wise?
No, it's been absolutely disastrous. We all know what happened with the pandemic and now it's taken effect on most clubs. But when you have a strong manager like Nigel Clough leave, it's always hard for the next person in charge to take over and, well, carry on what he'd done. And obviously finishing last season mid-table, I say that was an acceptable outcome despite being points per game. But this season, it's just been horrendous. And yeah, you can say it's been great that obviously had to let him go, but how much more can you take? You only got 2 wins in 21. It's the right decision at the end of the day.
And Charlie, coming to you, I guess Craig says there it's the right decision. My worry really, or my question is, he mentioned in his outgoing statement that he'd been given a fair crack of the whip. Because he was so popular and so well respected at Burton, is there a risk that perhaps on this occasion, which we don't often say, he might have even been given slightly too long?
Yeah, there's an element of nostalgia, isn't there? It's so hard because I think they're obviously Burton Albion. I've had obviously a tough season, but how far is enough? And I suppose it's looking at the squad they've got some real experience in there. You've got John Joe O'Toole, Michael Bostic, people like that. But then there's also some real young lads who have just sort of not really delivered. And I suppose it's hard. I suppose what I'm trying to get at is if you haven't got that squad playing for you, then you just have to call it a day, whether it's a club legend, a hero, or whatever, if it's not going. And I'm hoping they haven't, but I think they might have left themselves a bit too much adrift. And we'll go on to that a bit later on.
Yeah, unfortunately, it hasn't gone quite to plan. We've seen similar, actually, earlier in the season when we did the Tranmere one with Mike Jackson being promoted from assistant, and they acted pretty quickly when it wasn't working. But it can go all sorts of ways. But let's move on to Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink because, again, we're right at the start of the January transfer window. They've got a game in about an hour as we're recording this, his first one in charge. And he's back with Dino Maaamria as assistant, which is something we'll talk about later on too. But Craig, your initial reaction to Jimmy Floyd going back to Burton, because of course you missed the Grimsby one with Paul Hurst. So what's your view on a returning manager for a second stint?
Paul Hurst and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink both done excellent jobs. Yeah. And it's always say don't go back to where you were successful. And I mean, you can say the same thing for Nathan Jones, and look how Nathan Jones is doing, to be fair. And obviously, Nathan Jones doing a brilliant job at the moment. I think last two appointments, obviously, Hasselbaink and Hurst caught me by surprise because I wasn't actually expecting them to happen. Especially Hasselbaink, who's just recently been on Sky Sports the last 2 months on the Premier League game. So I didn't really see that coming. Obviously, he had a good record. He won 60% of his games, which is remarkable. And then obviously went up to QPR, which he wasn't really good there. So it's a good appointment, but as Charlie alluded to earlier, they've done it too late, in my opinion. Maybe. I think fans have got to be careful. There were good times on these previous managers, but if it doesn't work out second time, you'll probably ask what the hell happened 2, 3, 4 seasons ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And Charlie, coming back to you, of course, he's coming back 5 years after he left. Interestingly, his first statement when he joined the club the first time was about the stability attracting him. And then, of course, after taking them up and guiding them to the top of League One, he then went off to QPR. He's had a stint at Northampton. So coming back to Burton Albion, what are you expecting from him and how are you thinking the rest of the season's going to go?
Well, the big issue for me is it's a very different Burton Albion to the one that he probably took over 5 years ago and left as well. So I don't know. It's hard because actually you're talking about a man. Yeah, I appreciate he did really well with Burton Albion, but it was a different squad of players. I would argue, were a bit younger, a bit fresher than maybe what he's got here. Also, with that, it's that environment. If you're getting, I don't need to be saying this in negative. If you're getting beat every single week, it's not just a case of a new manager comes in, new manager bounce. There's obviously something a bit deeper if you've only won 2 games so far this season. So for me, in terms of that, I think the difficulty that he's going to have is not just, right, we need a bit of galvanising players. It's going to be a bit more than that. There's clearly some sort of lack of depth in the squad. There's clearly a lack of quality, to be brutally honest. I don't think the younger players that they've got on loan and things like that are working for them. So the point is, I think it's very chalk and cheese. And that's going to be, in relegation, you don't really want that. You need everyone pulling in the same direction. So for me, I don't think it's necessarily the greatest of appointments given this record. QPR, I mean, write that bit off. But even at Northampton, I don't think it worked particularly well. different time, different manager. So for me, no.
It's Wimp saying lowered at Northampton is a QPR.
Yeah. So I just think he's a very chalk and cheese manager, and you don't need that right now. You want someone who's going to galvanise everyone, and maybe he'll be returning like a phoenix from the flames like before, but I can't see it personally.
But then moving to you, Craig, of course, we're at the start of the January window. The statement about Buxton outgoing was that they tried to keep the playing budget similar to last year to help Buxton. But that, of course, means that in these difficult financial times, there's probably not a great deal of room for manoeuvre. So normally you'd say, well, maybe he can get some of his own players here. But here, largely, Charlie's right. He's going to have to try and galvanise the squad he's got.
I think it's going to be a very hard transfer window for Burton, to be honest. If they've got pretty much no budget, they'll have to rely on loans. They have signed like 5-6 loan players in the summer. I think he's just got to work with his team. Obviously, at the moment, they're used to losing. Obviously, that's not enough. And so they've got to find a way to get something out of this team, out of this squad, to pick up points. Obviously, they played Oxford today, which obviously Oxford are obviously not doing as well as we all expected. They've got to somehow just pick up something. If they get a win today against them, let's work on it. But recruitment-wise, it's going to be very tough for them.
But let's move on to Charlie, because Dino Maaamria has come in as his assistant as well. So before we talk about the rest of the season and what we expect, a quick word on that one, because it's a bit of a unique one. Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink talked about doing his badges with him. Of course, he's coached in the lower ends of the EFL and managed as well. And he's someone that people like Scott Laird have spoken quite highly of, who we've interviewed. So do you think that's quite a sensible move? Because Jimmy talks about him knowing the leagues, which potentially is going to be crucial as well.
Well, it's not just that. I think it's working in tight budgets. He was obviously manager at Stevenage, and regardless of what you think of them, they're never going to have the budgets in any league they're in. So in that sense, I think that's a good appointment of how to maybe make the best of limited resources. So you've got maybe Jimmy Floyd. I know he's been managing a bit lower down, but his background obviously is in the very top level of the game, and there's obviously a great experience and stuff you can bring to the table that will always benefit a team if you played there. But you do also need the I don't want to say the nitty gritty, but the other side of the game, which you would say Dino Maaamria from his playing career, both as and then as a manager, he'd be a lot more used to. So I don't necessarily think he's going to bring in loads of players. I don't think Dino Maaamria is going to attract someone that maybe Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink wouldn't have. But I do think that he's going to maybe give a bit of experience on the ground, the day-to-day sort of stuff that's going to help a club who have been near the bottom where he, and I mean the polite way possible, where he was when he was at Oldham, where he was when he was at Stevenage as well. So, I think it's a good appointment. Obviously, time will tell though.
And going on to the rest of the season now, obviously, we've got to talk about our favourite question, which is how we think they'll get on. And I know this is going to lead to much talk about me, because I had them as my dark horse for the playoffs based on some of the experience signed at the start of the season. I wish I'd gone for Gillingham, as Craig did in the end. But unfortunately, Burton find themselves bottom of the league. They've won 2 league games. They're 6 points from safety. So, Craig, starting with you, because as much as I had them in the playoffs, neither of you had them to go down. So, do you think they will go down? Or do you think Jimmy is the man that is going to keep them up? Craig, you're first.
No. We talk about rebuilding periods and that stuff. Obviously, this season's just so out of the picture of trying to rebuild a team, obviously, with the pandemic and that. But I think, just looking at the league table, obviously, they're currently bottom. We all said that. You said that. Obviously, they're only 6 points behind Rochdale. Obviously, they've played more games than anyone else down at the bottom. So that does not help them at all. Worst goal difference, conceded 45 goals this season. It's going to be a very, very tough ask for Burton Albion to survive this season, and I unfortunately don't see that happening. Sorry, Brewers.
Charlie, coming to you with the same question. Do you think there's a glimmer of hope for the Burton fans, or are you changing your pre-season prediction now as well?
I think I have to change. I think there's, unfortunately, the 3 games in hand that Rochdale have on them is key. I mean, 9 points as an example. It is League One. Anything happens in the EFL, as we well know. I mean, Wigan are down there, and I'd really not be doom and gloom, but you never know what's going to happen at Wigan from one day to the next. So it could be that sort of thing. I don't think they'll finish bottom. I think Swindon are on a massive slide as well, and I think actually haven't got that new manager bounce. There will be something. There'll be some sort of incline by having a new manager, and like we said about Dino Maaamria and people like that in there. I don't think it'll be enough to keep them up at the minute. However, shouldn't say this, but the way the COVID and the financial statements and that seem to be coming out from other teams, it just wouldn't surprise me if a couple go into administration or something like that, and then suddenly they're out of there. So on a football pitch basis, no, I don't think they'll do it. So I'm looking at their squad, and I think they've got some really good old heads in there. And if they're not doing it now, I think it's too late, to be brutally honest. I would expect that some of the lads, they've got Stephen Quinn, people like that there, they should be performing better, and they should be higher up the table with that. And if they haven't done that within 21 games, I can't see another 21 making much of a difference. So for me on that front, I don't think they'll do it. I'd like them to stay. I actually do like them as a club. I just think they've left themselves with too much to do.
And obviously, you mentioned a good point with Swindon. Me and Craig spoke about that. We both thought that they would struggle after their recent appointment, and that appears to have been the case. So I guess based on that answer, before I come in at the end, I'll ask you a follow-up question, which is, should Burton get relegated? Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink may still be there, may not. You can give your opinion on that. Where do you see them going next season? Do you think Jimmy will still be there? And do you think they will come back up? And I'll start with Charlie this time.
I think he can do it. I think the whole season, and with 2 transfer windows, I would like to think between him and the staff he's employed, they would have enough about them to recruit well enough. I do think they need to get rid of quite a lot over the summer. You know, as I mentioned, some of the names there, I think will probably be the wrong side of some nearly 35. Do you know what I mean? In that sense. So it's all about the recruitment. And we talked about any manager, but if they go down, which I think they might do, I can't see why they couldn't come back up with the right level of recruitment. And I think they've got that in place to do that. We're not obviously going to know that till the summer, but I think they've got the right infrastructure to do that. So I could see them coming back up.
Craig?
I think managers got to give them time. Obviously, it's hard when you start in January. You've got loads of games to cram in, and games could be potentially postponed. Obviously, not just from weather, but obviously from COVID and all that stuff. I hope he does stay in the summer, even if they get relegated to League Two. Give him the start next season, see how he gets on. And if he's doing well, which I do agree with Charlie, they probably will be up there, I think, if they're in League Two next season. Yeah, I think you've got to give Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink a bit of time. I think football owners, they make snap decisions so quickly without actually thinking long term. I think Burton Albion are a club that do think long term, to be fair. They're a well-run club, despite the financial strength last season. You've got to look at that. Obviously, they didn't spend much when they're in the Championship. They didn't spend much, obviously, working their way up through the leagues. So it would be sensible for Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink to stay on next season and see how he gets on there.
Completely agree. And I won't be sitting on the fence. I, as always, will finish off. And I'm going to give a bit of glimmer of hope. I actually think Burton will stay up. And the reason for this is that, one, they've got a lot of experienced players, which I think, if galvanised, can work well in a dressing room. But also, ironically, I think having played more games is going to end up being a benefit towards the end of the season, because more and more games are going to get called off the next couple of months, whether it's COVID or weather restrictions in the country with snow expected again. So I think that might actually help them, because if you get into a bad run down there and you've got 3 games a week, you're losing 9, 12 points very quickly. If Burton get on a run and they're only playing once or 1 or 2 times a week, it could actually be better for them, particularly with a more experienced squad. So I'm going to stick my neck on the line like I did wrongly in pre-season and say that I think Burton will survive, and I think Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink will be there next year. But whatever happens, as you two lads have said, because of the experience in the squad and the age of some of the players, there's going to have to be a massive overhaul in the summer. So hopefully with Burton, that will work successfully, because they're a well-run club, as you guys said. And even if we don't think they will, I think all of us would probably quite like them to stay up. So that's the only thing I think we can say there.
We went to watch them last season.
Yeah. We were in the away end at MK Dons.
We were in the away end. We were in the away end. The fans were very nice, very down to earth. Obviously, didn't really make it not a big fan base, but they were generally a very nice set of fans and very realistic. To be fair, obviously they lost players as well back in the last season. Obviously, Liam Boyce went to Hearts. Loads of goals gone missing there. Obviously, top goal scorers are on 2.
It's clear where the problem is, isn't it? But that's all for this managerial special. Of course, we wish the best of Burton for the rest of the season, and we'll wait and see eagerly what Jimmy Floyd Hasselbaink and Dino Maaamria can serve up. Thank you to Craig and Charlie for joining me as always. If you did enjoy this episode, please do put a thumbs up on the video. Let us know down in the comments what you think is going to happen for the rest of the season, whether you think you can stay up, and how busy your January is going to be. If you haven't already, subscribe down below for regular content from the podcast. You can follow us over on Twitter at HonestFootball3, and we'll see you next time.